Welcome back to the Digimon Seasonal Reviews, where I butcher character growth for my personal gain. I'm AJ, and as left off in the Tamers review, the next season to discuss is Digimon Data Squad, or Sabers in Japan. This season, much like Frontier, also has a rocky relationship with the fans, but has been seen as underrated in recent times. Personally, there's a lot I like about this season, but also things I dislike. So let's talk about it. I already went over the Shareverse background at the end of the last video, but for a brief recap, the Japanese government threatened to close the digital world following the D-Reaper incident, but Shinji compromised by establishing a government-run organization called DATS to supervise the world. In other words, they would have 75% share of the digital world, while Shinji had the remaining 25%. Behind the scenes, Shinji began to set in the seeds for the final Digidestined through the events of the Digimon Adventure movie. The Greymon data, originally the data of Leomon from Tamers, was converted into a new breed of the Agumon species and was studied by DATS. He would later break out, and that's where we are at the beginning of Data Squad. By 2006, the age of cashing in on the success of Pokemon was coming to a close. Many realized it was a losing battle to compete with one of the biggest franchises ever made, an IP that even exceeds its creators. So this was the end for series like Monster Rancher and Fighting Foodons. Yu-Gi-Oh! Was an exception since many people saw it as an ally to Pokemon rather than a rival, and both animes had a 4Kids dub on Kids WB, as well as the fact that it started out as a manga series. By this point, many people saw Digimon, the strongest competitor to Pokemon, to also fade into obscurity. The card games were vastly inferior, the video games couldn't keep up, and the anime had a polarizing fourth season. Many believed that Digimon's fate would be to eternally rot away on Disney's sister channel Jetix. But then out of nowhere, bam! A new season, Digimon Data Squad. Though the English dub was released a full year after its run in Japan, which there was called Sabers. Regardless, a new Digimon season after 3 to 4 years, a fresh start to bring in new audiences. And right off the bat, people were opposed to it. And the reason why was because the only reason why people— oh wait, I already made that joke in my Frontier review. Well, aside from that, people thought it would be an inferior season to what came before for many reasons. One of the reasons why people did not watch the season was because of the quote-unquote lack of originality. This was mainly because of the main characters. Data Squad focuses on 3 characters, much like Tamers, 2 guys and 1 girl, though here we get a 4th lead. The main character, who wears red, has an Agumon partner that digivolves into a Greymon line. The second in command has blonde hair and wears green, and he has a blue wolf partner that has a quadrupedal champion form, then a bipedal ultimate form, and a metal mega form. Then our female lead, who has the same English voice actress as Sora, also has a plant-type Digimon who has a huge champion form, a humanoid plant girl as an ultimate form, and her mega form is a Rosemon, much like Mimi's Palmon. But even with these similarities, the characters are different enough to not be overshadowed by their adventure counterparts, one of which being that they all have family problems. Marcus is a literal hothead. He only cares about the strongest there is, but wants to help those misfortunate than him. His family issues tie to how his father left his family years ago and never returned, though in Shareverse he's only been away for a few months, and Marcus doesn't see eye to eye with him. Now, people complain how he's not a real leader because he doesn't wear goggles. I bet people would have a panic attack if they saw Hero from Ghost Game. He's played by Quentin Flynn, aka Sheldon, a lot of people forget about that, but also Axel from Kingdom Hearts, and Raiden from Metal Gear. I'm just imagining somebody making a meme of Raiden punching Armstrong, but it's Marcus and Craniumon.
Making the mother of all omelets here, Jack. Can't fret over every egg.
Thomas is a Japanese Austrian who has family ties back at home, who is strict and by the books. He initially finds Marcus as an annoyance due to his carefree attitude, but accepts him as a valuable partner in the end. Later on, he also has to deal with his family coming to Japan and force him to take responsibility, especially since his little sister has an illness that he's always concerned with, even to the point where he has to work with Karada in order to support his family. Regardless, he does save his family in the end in doing the right thing, and he somehow wins a Nobel Peace Prize, which, good for him, I guess. Yoshino, or Yoshi for short, goes with the flow and takes things one step at a time, which reflects her catchphrase she uses throughout the season, "This is the worst." Her backstory is more tame, being insecure about how other people think of her outside of things. Yeah, she definitely has the weakest character backstory, especially compared to the guys. But eventually she builds up her confidence towards the end of the season and becomes a police officer in the epilogue. Lastly is Keenan, who is the most interesting character of the 4 by far. He was raised in the digital world after getting sucked in as a baby, and by witnessing the death of his Frigimon mom, he works with Marukimon as a means to attack any human encounters. This of course will lead into how Keenan was a baby in Shareverse and how the digital world was not created in the 1970s, leading me into creating the notion that Shinji temporarily brought back the accelerated time frame before the government would use his project after Tamers ended. That way they could have a clean slate to work with. But before this point, one of the decoy organizations were using physical expeditions in the digital world, and both Keenan, and we'll later find out Spencer, Marcus's dad, was stuck in there. Hence why Keenan is now a kid by the time the time frame became at an equilibrium. Speaking of, they mentioned how other people got stuck in the digital world, and that's the reason why Keenan's parents went on the expeditions, but they never bring up that aspect again. Are we left to assume that those people died in the digital world? Considering the fact that everywhere you go, there's something to kill you in a heartbeat, that would make sense. As for the Digimon partners, they do reflect their tamer's goals. Agumon follows Marcus around to get a better feel of companionship. I should also bring up that Brian Beacock plays Agumon, which leads into the tidbit that in Shareverse, Neo Agumon still retains data that were memories when it was a Leomon, and perhaps the reason why he sounds like that were because of the memories of Takato, Jerry's lover. Gaomon reflects Thomas's by-the-book attitude that starts to open up his emotions and not see him as an emotionless authoritarian figure. Lalamon being the only close friend Yoshi has and tries to be as friendly as possible. Also, hot take, Lalamon in her Digivolutions is better than Palmon. Not every day you'll find someone who prefers Lilamon over Lilymon. Falcomon serves more like a brother to Keenan since they did spend many years with one another, and that bond grows and develops even after Keenan finds out about his real life. Honestly, the side characters don't really get to do much this season, and it's really a downgrade from what we got in Tamers. Samson was a good commanding officer that gave out orders to his subordinates, as well as his struggles with the government and later the Royal Knights. But not much about his character. Also the fact that he's played by Jameson Price, and that his voice did not change at all when playing Sergio 10 years later. His partner Kudamon doesn't do much, mostly parodying what Samson says, but he's also played by Sam Riegel, so we got Teddy in there as well. There's also Miki and Megumi, which serves as the assistants for the main team, but they don't do much. Give them something. Hell, throw in a romantic thing if you're really desperate. Plus, their pawn chessmons are worthless. Hell, I don't even think they ever had a single line of dialogue. How about make them a male and female variation so you can have a king and queen chessmon to complete your set? Then there's Yoshima, who works on the outskirts of dance and helps out whenever the time is needed. At least Kamemon has something to do, and you really have to dig for scenes where he does stuff. Last up is the rest of Marcus's family. His mom is pretty nice, I will give her that. There's also Marcus's little sister Christy and her partner Beomon. As a change towards Kari and Suzy, Christy gets her partner early on in the season, and this Beomon is different than Sora's since A, this is a male Beomon, and B, he has a champion form of Aquilamon and not Bergermon. And finally there's Spencer Damon, who while researching the digital world, came across Bancho Leomon using burst mode, and the two became partners, even making a small pact with Marukimon as a temporary treaty. But then Spencer almost died, and as an act of kindness, Bancho Leomon decided to merge souls and bodies with Spencer, creating a Piccolo, Nail, Kami situation. However, this also led to King Drazo to take over control of his body now that it was an empty shell. And that also explains how in Shareverse, Spencer didn't age, he just hanged out in Bancho Leomon for all those years. He does get to reunite with his family, but of course Leomon dies. This is Digimon after all. However, the villains in the season are really interesting. Well, at least one of them, but I'm getting ahead. Marukimon initially sees humans as a threat and wants them purged, using Keenan and his other men as subordinates, including the seasoned Skatsumon, who later calls Keenan a traitor numerous times after he joins stats, but he does get a redemption arc later on. However, much like Tamers, there's a gotcha moment where he realizes that he misunderstood them and wants to help them out, only to get killed by the season's best villain, maybe the whole show if we're really stretching it, and that's Kurata. This is a human villain archetype I wanted to see for a while now, and it doesn't hold back. Kurata is a sociopath. He only sees Digimon as monstrous nightmares after a misunderstanding with Spencer allegedly giving up his life for him. As such, he begins to go on a genocide thinking that he is in the right. He creates his own robotic Digimon that permanently deletes digital monster data, and he plans on using Belphemon to say fuck it and wipe out the whole world. This is an irredeemable villain done right. You understand his motives and he goes through with it. And as I said before, he doesn't get a redemption. He dies along his goals and dreams. Oikawa lacked any sympathetic vibes, and yet he realized that he was used by Myotismon, and at the very last minute, he dies redeemed, which I always hated. Yamaki was a great character, but again, he wasn't a pure villain. Just lacked a lot of knowledge of something bigger than him. Kurata manifests in seething hatred towards the unknown and uses that power to ruin the lives of many. This fake-ass Otacon somehow seems to be the best thing of the season. Damn. But Kurata has his own squad too. There are the Biohybrids, which serves as rivals to the main trio, except they show past the halfway point of the season. And for the record, Shinji, I get you like human Digimon bonding, but can we please stop having them fuse? It worked in Tamers because we haven't seen it before. It worked in Frontier because it was the main gimmick of the season. Is there any logical sense why humans can turn into Digimon for this season other than it looks cool? And what's worse is that we still keep seeing it after Data Squad. Bandai just can't get enough of it. But for story purposes, it does work here since Kurata is a mad scientist, and he does drug them up to have a second Digimon form. And last, there's the Royal Knights and King Drazel, which I won't go over here. I'll wait until we get discussing the season's arcs. Whoa, I kind of jumped the gun there for a bit, so let's step back and discuss some outside things. If you recall from the Disney years of my Fox Kids special series, Jetix was not in the best place in 2007. The content that was airing were old reruns, and they were so desperate to the point of airing Warner Brothers shows on a Disney Channel because they held the rights to it. It's a miracle that Data Squad has an English dub. They didn't have to make it just because it was a new Digimon season. Plus the fact that they were able to make this dub and air every episode at least once is something to admire. This could have been another incident, such as the case with Shinzo, an English dub that was completed in 2002 but cancelled mid-airing and wouldn't complete until years later. It's almost scary to think that there are other English dubs fully finished that will never see the light of day. I'm glad people were able to watch the show and all the episodes that they aired. The only problem for a while was watching them legally. Disney was smart enough to release the season on DVD by multiple volumes, however they stopped with 2. So, in order to finish the dub, you would have to watch these episodes illegally. Now we don't have to worry about that problem anymore since all the episodes are in the box set. Heck, they even made a season 1 to 5 box set that includes only the 3 characters. Sucks there's no Keenan, but wow, they actually included Laomon and not Duskmon for Frontier. Even I had to add him in when I was 13. But for some reason, Data Squad is the one season that pops up every now and then. I remember seeing Data Squad a part of Gabillion in 2013. That was the on-demand channel that housed Code Lyoko like all the time. And even more recently, I was at a mall in 2018 and I noticed one of the TVs in a kid's shoe store and bam, there's Data Squad. That was a massive mindfuck. Speaking of, you'll come to notice that the animation for the season is a bit off. Granted, 3 years in the anime business, things can change, but its own art style gives the season its identity. Plus, in some cases, the Digimon are drawn with thicker outlines, sometimes looking that they came from another animated project. Feels like they were going for the same animation as the French-Canadian shows that were airing around this time, such as Team Galaxy and another marathon show that was airing on Jetix, Monster Buster Club. Anyone else remember this show? We're homies. Because of this drastic change in animation, and the more extreme tropes like Marcus punching Digimon, people like to call this season the grown-up variation of the franchise. However, the show does retain its campy goodness, and besides, nothing will be as dark as Tamers. As such, the first episode is called, There Are Monsters Among... I swear, Among Us has ruined the phrase for me so bad. But on a different yet similar note, the music is different in comparison to the other seasons. The first opening song, Going Going My Soul, is not performed by Wada, but he does sing the second opening song, Hiyori. Personally, my favorite theme in the whole series. There's only one insert song for the transformation sequences, and that's Believer, which is also a great song, so I'm not complaining. As for the end credit songs, there's One Star and Ryuzi, and the second one I really love. However, for the dub, the theme song is weird, and it's short, only 30 seconds. It might be me, but the song sounds like it's trying to be an American rendition of Believer, and that becomes more apparent since they use the instrumentals of the song during fight scenes. If you want to try for yourself, take a listen to Believer and then listen to the English theme song. And the theory doesn't sound too far off considering some of the literal translations from the Japanese script throughout the season, even with some of the names, which, don't worry, we'll get to. But for real, let's discuss the 4 arcs of the season, and honestly, there's not that much. Or at least at first. The DATS arc and the first half of the Digital Worlds arc pretty much follow the same trend of a Digimon of the Week, and eventually getting an ultimate form throughout. Data Squad does have a rocky start if you're looking for something innovative. All DATS does is beat up a Digimon and send their data, now reformed into an egg, back to the digital world. At least our trio gets to the digital worlds a bit earlier in the season, whether it be in the first or second arc, jumping back and forth between the two worlds. It does pick up with Keenan's backstory being fleshed out, and Kurata double-crossing Dads. Who could have seen that coming? Also, it's interesting that our lead characters just take a break. Marcus goes back to school for the time being, and no one isn't really sure of what to do with Kurata now in charge of Dads, but they do reorganize themselves and begin to fight back. By that point, they also fight the biohybrids, Kurata's goons, and they don't care, they just kill Digimon because they're in their way. Marcus and the others have to go train with Evangeliamon, and in the next episode, they whoop their asses. Although, one thing that I find odd is that when these characters are defeated, it looks and act like they died. Straight up murder. We don't get a full confirmation status on them until the very last episode, so I thought they were legit dead after they were defeated. Tsubasa was like a fine rival to Marcus. I don't have a lot to say about him. It might be me, but I thought Ivan reminded me of Zeus from Gravity Falls, probably the accent, and I guess Nanami had a thing for Thomas. And one thing to add, Nanami's second form is Bio-Rotismon, and that's wrong. It's supposed to be Bio-Lotusmon, especially since the original Lotusmon uses an L and not an R. I get the reason is because L's and R's in Japan sound the same, but did no one double check on this? In the end, Kurata awakens Bufflemon and also gets absorbed by him, and for some ridiculous reason, in the episode where Bufflemon goes into his rage mode, he has this really goofy voice.
You wretched fool! How dare you compare me to a lowly human!
I guess even the voice actors were embarrassed by this, so in subsequent episodes he never talks. Definitely for the best. I also forgot to mention that in order for this season to not be a carbon copy of Adventure, it has its own gimmick of Digivolutions known as Burst Mode. It basically turns the Digimon into a different color palette and maybe a couple of augmented accessories. Shine Greymon also has a dark burst mode called Ruin Mode. And again, Dark Digivolutions! We don't need to have another season where the main character loses control over their partner. Unless you're Ghost Game and doing something interesting with it, don't have the lead Digimon have a dark form for a minimum of 1 episode. Also, Kurata's head comes out of Bufflemon's stomach sometimes. I wonder if Seth Rogen watched this shit while high and used the same imagery for Sausage Party with the douche being up the clerk's rectum and his face is in his fly hole. Man, what the fuck am I talking about? Anyway, Shine Greymon goes burst mode and saves the day. Or does he? Because almost after, Kurata pretty much gets vaporized by King Drazel. So, good riddance. Now we're at the final arc. The Royal Knights are the King Drazel arc. And honestly, I was disappointed for the most part. You'd think a group of guys that were built up throughout the whole season would be a big deal, but not really. For starters, Craniumon is the leader? I always saw him as a jobber, never King Drazel's right-hand man. Though I did like his personal beef with the Daemons, and him having anger issues, a lot of Kylo Ren energy. Now, some members did not appear in the season. For the case of Denkumon and Justmon, they were not created in 2007. Examon is way too huge to be in this show. But even Alphamon, the guy synonymous for running the Royal Knights, is not here. This could have been a great opportunity to promote the X Evolution movie that stars Alphamon. Heck, Drazel was in that movie as well. Also, Dynasmon being the second in command was a letdown. We literally saw him have a prominent role last season. Sure, it was a 3-year difference, but watching them not too far off from each other just makes me think that the writers had no idea what to do with the other characters. And I don't think they did. Within the first episode of the arc, both Kentaurismon and Gallantmon are frozen in a block of ice, so they're out of commission for majority of these episodes. Magnamon literally has one scene talking to Dynasmon, and we never see him fight Dax or do anything else. All-Force Veedramon has like one line of dialogue in a group meeting, and we also see him never fight Dax or do anything else, which is really disappointing since he is one of the only few Digimon that can Digivolve into an Ultra level, a form higher than Mega. In Frontier, Crusadermon was a female Digimon clad in pink armor. In Data Squad, Lord Nightmon is a male Digimon clad in pink armor. And yes, I am aware, Lord Nightmon was a guy in the Japanese dub of Frontier, but this is another example of the direct translations from the original script, right down to the name. Nobody realized that it was supposed to be Lord and not Load when translated into English? Believe it or not, Leopardmon of all people actually has a good representation. He has a solid self-contained episode during this arc, and his fight with Yoshi and Keenan is pretty good. But of course, it has to be Leopardmon that gets this treatment. Literally nobody likes this guy. Omnimon was such a letdown. He shows up in the first episode of the arc, and then at the end where he finally smacks some knowledge into his comrades. Wow, like 5 to 7 episodes of doing nothing, now you open your mouth! I don't have much to say about King Drazel, or Yggdrasil. It's basically just a generic computer program gone mad. It's trying to be the D-Reaper 2.0 by not only deleting the real world, but the digital world as well, but at least it does take over Spencer's body for most of the arc, so you're led to believe that he's the true final boss, and the bait and switch with Bancho Leomon carrying Spencer's soul towards the end when Drazel is fully revealed. It gets defeated by Marcus punching the shit out of its womanly face, a frame too hot it was cut from the dub. It says it's sorry, and dies. Seriously, how many times are we gonna have the Royal Knights as antagonists and then they realize that they were being duped? There's this, Cyber Sleuth, and isn't their goal to protect the digital world? Cause it seems to me they do more harm than good every time they show up. However, we reach the end of only 48 episodes, by far the shortest season of the anime. In order to keep a balance in the digital world, every Digimon has to go back there permanently. The second half of the last episode is extremely interesting. We see all members of DADS contemplating the impending fate that they will be separated from their partners forever. I get that it's trying to replicate the same feel as the last episode of Adventure, but here it's done as its own thing, and I like that. However, as a last-minute decision, Marcus decides to join alongside Agumon and others as he makes a permanent residence at the digital world. Personally, I think this decision fits Marcus's aggressively positive personality to things, making a promise to Agumon to stay friends till the end. We also get an epilogue scene depicting the cast used later as Going My Soul places out. So, the government realized that Digimon is just beyond their comprehension and concluded that it would be for the best to shut down DADS after the defeat of Drazel. This gave Shinji full control over the digital world again, though neither of them expected Marcus to live in the digital world. But in a way, this seemed like a perfect opportunity for Shinji to take a break. Having Marcus supervise the digital world seemed like a perfect opportunity for Shinji to do something else. So Shinji created an online avatar, and based off Ryo, he called the avatar Jedi. He talked to Marcus that he was a representative of the digital world, and how he was going to be the human caretaker from here on out. However, he wanted to make sure his final Digidestined eggs would be in a safe place. So, the Dark Masters stormed the lab, and Shinji placed the eggs on File Island. All except for one Digi-Egg, but I won't go over that in this video. After almost 3 years of doing this, Shinji was free from the digital world. And around this point, all information about the Nerve incident in 1989 and its participants were classified from the government. In other words, Shinji could start over, start a new life. And so, Shinji, Rei, and Asuka, who was still living in America at the time, decided to meet up and try to make a new image of themselves. They spent the next 3 years how this was going to work, and concluded that they came to the main universe in Shareverse since the universe they came from was destroyed but slowly being reformed. Instead of VR machines, they used giant robots, and they used to live in a post-apocalyptic Tokyo in 2015. Their tall tales became really popular, and in December of 1994, the first chapter of the Evangelion manga adaptation was released. And 10 months later, the first episode of the anime was aired. Almost overnight, Eva became a smash hit, distancing Shinji and the digital world's incidents from the past miles away in the public eye. Between this and Gundam, I guess Japan really has a thing for giant robots and characters having mental breakdowns. However, 1996 rolled around, and Shinji knew he would have to come back to the digital world because by that point, the final Digidestined were ready. To wrap things up, Digimon Data Squad is a good season. Sure, there is a lot of hiccups here and there, but for the most part, it is a season that should be respected and placed alongside the other seasons. While there are similarities between this and the seasons that came before, it has a lot of differences, just enough to be considered its own thing. By the way, Data Squad has a movie, but unlike the other films, they were never released outside of America, plus it's absurdly non-canon, so I don't care. Next time, we reach the beginning of the end of the series with Digimon Adventure, the beginning of the anime. Shareverse, am I right? Until then, I'm AJ, and yes, I am aware that I did not close out the last video with my phrase. I did that for thematic reasons, as well as leaving it on a cliffhanger. Don't remind me. Anyway, see ya!